Continuing on the report of the Zenith species of the Volcano region, we push further into the interior caves. During this outing, another first generation wyvern rears its ugly head, and I do mean ugly. There's a reason I use the word striking rather than gorgeous or resplendent in the intro video, as there's really no way to defend this ruptured pustule that is Zenith Gravios. Despite being a first generation monster and much closer to the DOS Foundation Frontier, it was one of the final few Zeniths to be introduced, coming along in the final year of the game's availability in the ZZ update. Gravios in Frontier had two pretty threatening contributions to his Zenith's move pool, including this sweeping beam and an unnatural burst of speed from a forward dash attack, which we'll see augmented a little later on, but for now the visual differences is what we'll be covering. It's pretty clear the changes from our standard Gravios here, a much bulkier, if that were possible, frame, as well as a rather prominent and threatening looking nasal horn. You'll also note the much bulkier and less symmetrical tail. It's much less of a mace rather than a dense hunk of stone compared to the base species. And then of course is the chest. Zenith Gravios' entire design is that of an erupted or currently erupting volcano. The back has ruptured open entirely, forming a dense crater in the back of the beast, and the explosive culprit has also sundered the chest open as well. You'll recall from other species of Gravios, especially Black Gravios, that the chest and back were common places for heat to be expelled, and were also fairly typical places for hunters to break open to gain an upper hand in these fights. With this, we can surmise that Zenith Gravios was simply unable to contain its massive internal heat and popped itself open to regulate the molten core inside. Big old explodey body is pretty hard to miss, so with that in mind, how does this Zenith part affect the fight itself? Zenith Fireblight once again rears its ugly head for you to prepare for in this fight, and this is featured for the main purpose of covering that exposed and open underbelly. As slow and as sluggish as Gravios is, it doesn't need to run you down to take you out, rather it waits for you to come to it. At close range, a lot of common animations and taunts will involve the chest wound bursting with volcanic fire, meaning that you're still going to have to pay very close attention to the gaps between each burst to ensure that you aren't getting thrown out of your combos. You aren't safe at long range, however. Not only does the volcano here use the standard species fire beams and the aforementioned dash forward, but during the slam attack with the right leg, meteors will erupt from the back wound, whereby they'll home in on distant hunters to burst and cause significant damage over time if you're at medium range. All you have to do with this is just keep moving if you find yourself caught in it, and you should outpace it. Now for the ancillary effects to watch out for here will be Zenith Tremor and Zenith Roar. They're both nasty little things, that's for sure, but as long as you keep track of the legs when they raise and always assume that any slam will hit you at most ranges, you'll be pretty guaranteed to evade them. The roars, however, can be handled in a much more enjoyable way. Gravios likes to pepper some AoE attacks with this roar to catch anyone running away, but if you're up close and dodging as you should, these will be easily avoided, as you'll dodge when the attack comes out along with the roar at the same time. After this though, you're thinking, what else can I do to deal with these roars? Well, it's a good idea to focus on the face here. Reason being is that once you break the face enough to shatter the horn, for some reason the roars receive a permanent downgrade. They'll lose their zenith level entirely and becomes pretty much completely useless. Something you'll see in some later Z level monsters, and good to bear in mind for this purpose. As a lesser tangent, I do enjoy how, even with all of the focus on the zenith part as the centerpiece for these fights, there is still some merit to breaking other parts off of the monster's body, and it has a tangible effect in the actual battle. We see things like this in the main series with Barioth and a few other monsters, but maybe it's a topic for a later video, but I really would like to see the main series games lean into that a lot more, reducing levels of roars with breaking faces and so on. Just something to think about. Onto the level changes now. You'll first fight Gravios in the volcano caverns in the first two fights right by the base camp, and then later find him looking for round 2 with a Cantor in the battleground at G ranks 600 and 800. The first change you'll see is we get graced with a brand new attack in the GR 400 quest. Gravios will go for a long wind-up stomp attack which summons a huge circle of lava pits around him. There'll be a short gathering of energy, and then later another burst of fire combined with a massive roar. It'll have a pretty significant opening for you to get ready to dodge though. There's a hell of a wind up here. Your only struggle with this attack will be getting caught by the lava pits if you choose to retreat, as when they burst they'll do some pretty heinous damage over time that doesn't trigger any sort of guard, so you've got to be mindful of where you're stood or rolling into. From the rest of my observations, the only new features in GR600 is the Battleground Arena where you don't have anywhere to run to, and Gravios does seem to have a tendency to double slam his tail as a combo a bit more. This is just anecdotal though, so don't completely take my word for it, but this attack is specifically baited by being behind him when an attack comes to the end, so just bear this in mind if you're trying to circle around to get a new vantage point. Finally, the big boy, G rank 800. There is only one new move to be wary of, but it's a hell of a thing. You can see here, Gravios will fly up into the sky, not something we see often, and slam back down. If you get hit by the initial slam of this attack, you get launched up into the air and immediately rendered into dust by the eruption from its back. You get hit by the slam, there's no dodging the rest of it. Unsurprisingly, it's a pretty sizable chance of a one-shot, and if you're the type to enjoy the 70% damage reduction of Hulk potions, even that isn't going to get you out of dying. Luckily, Gravios winds up this attack for so long he practically sends you a Google invite weeks before the attack even begins, so you've got ample time to get ready to dodge the slam and the follow-up AoE. So now we've gotten familiar with his moveset, what happens to Zenith Grav here when you shut down the reactor installed in his stomach and break the Zenith part? For starters, this happens in phases. First, the chest opening shuts down and then the back. The chest is the most dramatic change in my opinion, as this either outright removes or massively reduces the range of the frequent AoE bursts. You also get a sweet topple from breaking the back, but at this point Gravios will be pretty close to dead, so at this point you won't see the loss of projectiles as much of a benefit for long. All things considered, for a late ZZ Zenith, Gravios was also fairly forgiving. Certainly if you use Zenith fire resistance you avoid a lot of trouble from this menace of a blight, and the fairly quick removal of large AoEs with the chest break meant that you were rarely fighting the guy at full power for long. It's comical how quickly that chest break happens, and then it's pretty easy from there on out. On top of this, if you decide to go with a different weapon, pierce bullets being as strong as they are made him a complete fodder for ranged attacks, so if you were really struggling, you could just cop out and bring a gun, much like the rest of Monster Hunter. All things considered, Zenith Gravios is fearsome, but he's going to be no match for you. This concludes the second report of the Volcano region. Cera out.